Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Magic Mics. We get started as we do each and every week by introducing my two co-hosts. I have them and they rule. Ruben Bressler.
Hi. Easy for you to say.
Aaron Campbell.
I feel like we need one of those clickers from the movies with like take two.
Take two. All right. Hello, everybody. Let's just back this up. Hello, everybody. and Welcome to the. I was kidding. All right. So, as you can tell, we're back in Google Hangoutsville. No service is perfect, whether it's Skype, whether it's Google Hangouts. However, Google Hangouts does seem to have better audio, but we have had a few issues here in the pre-show. But regardless, we're here. We're going to try to make it work, obviously. I don't have my cool, borders and, sweet graphics and stuff. But, there are a lot of people who said they didn't care and they liked it better this way. So high five to that. We are going to get started, as we do each and every week, with the first pick. And, of course, the first pick has to be the Banned and Restricted update, which included the modern bannings of Eye of Ugin to the shock of no one. However, there was a little bit of shock, and by I mean a lot of bit of shock, for Ancestral Vision and Sword of the Meek to be unbanned, because one of those cards is very scary if it's able to ever sort of go off. But the other one is the one for me that is really interesting. That card is busted with Thopter Foundry because whenever it goes to the graveyard, it comes right back into play. Well, Thopter Foundry lets you pay a generic mana, sacrifice an artifact, put a 1/1 Thopter into play, and gain a life. So you can just, for as much mana as you have, you just burn it right through the Foundry. And so that's pretty crazy. So that happened, and also for the first time in 20 years. Has a creature been restricted in Vintage ever since Ollie of Cairo? The first is Lodestone Golem. You know why? Because Mishra's Workshop is $700. That's why they don't ban Mishra, or they don't restrict Mishra's Workshop, because lots of people put lots of money in getting their playsets. Please don't screw them up. So while a lot of people, some of the people who I read in terms of their Vintage impact and the things that they know and they care about the format and so on and so forth, they kind of see that restricting Mishra's Workshop would have caused more of a problem than just basically kind of killing this deck of stacks.
Yeah.
So Ruben,
well, there were also some
Aaron,
people.
please.
Oh no, I was just going to say I was reading Nat Mo's article on Gathering Magic, and he's sort of one of the authorities on Vintage, to be honest, in my opinion. And he was calling into question where they got their data from, because there aren't really that many Vintage events. And he had listed results from one of the most recent events, and he didn't really feel that the deck was that overwhelming. And so he was one of the people who it seemed like he felt it wasn't necessary. And so I thought that was interesting that the majority of the Vintage people that I follow, at least, didn't really understand the decision.
Yeah, that's the impression that I get as well. It seems that a lot of the decision was based on the Vintage Super League as well as internal Wizards of the Coast testing, and not so much on other tournaments around the country and around the world, which is fine. There aren't a ton of Vintage tournaments, period, and so some of the best information that they have access to is through the VSL and through internal testing. But a lot of the other major voices that aren't a part of the VSL directly and aren't a part of the internal testing thought that this was a surprising change and was kind of not the best that they could have done for Vintage. I would particularly point you to Danny Batterman's article on Newmont Gaming called What Now? In which he sort of describes why he thought that the Lodestone Golem choice was an odd one instead of some of the other cards of the format, even other cards in the Shops deck, such as Workshop itself, but other problem cards that could have been chosen. Lodestone Golem, it feels like a Bloodbraid Elf style ban where they don't want to ruin the deck entirely. They want to leave a little bit of it in place so that it's still a 1.5 level 2 kind of level player, but they don't want to completely hamstring the deck. Particularly with Vintage, you have really 3 major pillars of the format now that the Storm style decks are fine, but they aren't really one of the major pillars. You have these blue-based control decks that recently have been adding Monastery Mentor, and then you have Dredge, and then you have Stacks or Workshop. And banning Workshop entirely would chop an entire leg out and sort of unbalance everything in Vintage. So I understand not doing that, but the Lodestone Golem one is pretty surprising.
Well,
But,
I mean, they would be restricting it in Vintage, which I understand is a different thing.
Well, yeah.
Well, I'm just noting they're not going to ban anything in Vintage.
Yeah,
They're going to restrict it, and that's fine. It's whatever.
You still get to pull one copy if you're Juggernaut.
It's just weird that you have all these like blue cards which are ridiculous, and then you have the VSL kind of talking around each other about how bad it is and why do we have to keep losing to this and why do we have to keep playing this. But any sort of the real world data that I've seen doesn't say that shops is like this weird oppressive thing. It's just like, well, the people who play in the VSL didn't like it, so like, okay, let's just restrict it. That's really strange.
Yeah, it's a bit odd. I'm not a huge Vintage person, so I don't really know. Now that I'm on the East Coast, I'm going to have some more input on it because I'll be able to watch some more Vintage. I'll actually probably get to watch some live Vintage sometime in the near future. So I might have some more input on it as it develops. But Vintage is this format where only 3 at most cards from any given set impact the format, and so it's a very slow-moving format. And so if they want to actually shake something up, they actually have to do something like this. But again, I'm not a Vintage scientist. I'm not a dude that knows what's happening there. I'm much more interested in these modern changes.
Right. I mean,
these are huge shakeups.
Yeah, absolutely. There was the fact that they got rid of Eye of Ugin and not Eldrazi Temple was a thing, which meant Eldrazi decks can still exist, which I think is a good thing. You can still have your 2 Eldrazi Temple nut draw. Okay, fine. Well done. You got your turn 2 Thoughtseer. That's great. But there's no way it's going to be happening near as much, and you're not going to be able to generate 7 to 9 mana out of your 1 land over 2 or 3 turns. Like, that's absurd. So I'm glad of that. I think Ancestral Vision was a card, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's been on the ban list ever since Modern was a format.
Correct. It has never been legal.
That's amazing because we really get to see that card. That card, when it was in Standard, it was one of the things I got to talk to R&D about, whether it was around the time or right after the the rotation of Time Spiral and whatnot. They were like, we're scared to death of this card. Like, it's really good. It's very powerful. And it draws you 3 cards. All you have to do is live for those 3 turns and stop them from killing you, and then you get to Ancestral Recall basically for free at that point. And that's an incredibly powerful thing. That puts control decks basically in the front seat as long as they can make sure that thing resolves. I think there's a lot more tools to fight it these days, and even the Eldrazi processors, as long ago as a set or two, are able to take advantage of, well, okay, you're suspending something, whatever, process it, thanks.
Yeah. Control has yet to be a thing in Modern for several years. We've been missing a control deck in Modern, and people have, there's been decks that have had like a moment where like Grixis was a thing for a little while. People were playing Delver decks for a while. We've recently seen blue-white come out of the woodwork, but that was primarily as a response to Eldrazi. I have several friends who are blue mages. I myself tried playing Esper Gifts the other day, which some would argue isn't really a control deck, but I'm going to go ahead and call it one. And it's very difficult. You have to be good against the combo decks. You have to be good against the aggro decks. You have to be good against the burn decks. And, there's just it's really hard to build a deck that can tackle everything. And it also suffers from a lack of a cheap way to refill your hand. People were using things like Think Twice, and, blue decks always begrudgingly use Serum Visions. They say, well, this isn't Brainstorm, but we'll use it. And so this really does give control decks something to do. And I think that it's not hard for control decks to stay alive for that long with the tools that they have, and it's easier for them to refuel. There's also been talk about the other card. I don't know if you mentioned it or not, but the other one could also see play in a control deck as a finisher. And so I'm really excited to see. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. Sort of the Meek.
Yeah. So I'm excited. I think this it'll be nice to see some control decks on the scenes. I think the format, suffers the wrong word for it, but it doesn't feel right to not have a control deck around.
I agree with that. Yeah, I think that it was about time that they were able to take some of these guys off the bench. I think Ancestral Vision did its time. It's time to give it an experiment, and if it fails, you know what? They can just reban it. It's not that big a deal.
Well,
Ancestral Vision is such a unique card that, first of all, you don't have the problem of Shardless Agent or dealing with things like Shardless Agent to be able to cascade into it and cast it for free.
Right.
The best you're going to be able to do is Goblin Dark Dwellers, which is a 5-mana 4/4 creature. So, which if you're seeing play as a 5-mana 4/4, that's perfectly fine by my count in this format. I think that's it was a good unban. You know, it was on on a surprise scale. It didn't surprise me too much. Eye of Ugin getting the axe was like a 2. I was not very surprised. Ancestral Vision was like a 4, maybe a 5. Sword of the Meek was like an 8. I was real surprised Sword of the Meek came off the bench, because that was a major player in Extended, the precursor to this format, that had even more powerful things happening.
Right.
Yeah.
And all of those pieces are now just in place. You know, I think that it's going to spawn new archetypes. Now, I guess the version of the deck that it was most powerful in also had another combo alongside it, which was Vampire, Hexmage, and Dark Depths. And
right.
that combo does not see play currently.
Well, and for good reason.
After Sword combo, Sword of the Meek being the card that was recently unbanned. I'm interested to see if that actually has an effect on the format. Because, you know, as of now, Affinity is still untouched, so everybody's going to be playing Ancient Grudges and Stony Silences and things like that still.
Right. The splash damage is
you know,
there.
Right, and Abrupt Decay becomes better because now Eldrazi is less popular, and so the Jund and Junk decks become a lot better, and so you'll see more Abrupt Decays and things like that to take care of Thopter Foundry. So I'm interested to see how it shakes up the format, and I definitely agree with Aaron that, you know, these cards don't go into an aggro deck. They don't really go into a combo deck, so the only home left is a control shell. And so I'm excited to see people's attempts at true control.
Sure. There was also some talk about, like, you know, if they unban Jace the Mind Sculptor, and if they had to reban it, that would be a disaster. And I'm like, really? I mean, it would be a, you know, it'd be one of the, like, it would be one of those cases in which, for the end of time, first of all, it would never be unbanned again. But until the end of time, you would say, they would be like, look, you see what happened? You see what you wanted? That's what happens. I don't understand how it would be this, like, insane disaster, like, of a format or whatever as a result.
Yeah, I was just happy that my deck didn't get banned, because I play Ad Nauseam and we rely on Simian Spirit Guide. And hey, Ruben,
jeez,
you played Ad Nauseam.
No, hey, look, this is just classic Aaron, all that matters is me bias that I was laughing at. But then you actually brought up a good point, that Simian Spirit Guide was a reasonable card that could have gotten banned. I was actually
so when the sorry, I was just gonna.
No, go ahead.
I was going to finish my thought, but no, I was just going to say that, you know, the Eldrazi Temple, you know, sort of, and the Eye of Ugin brought up the issue of fast mana, and people started talking about how this is yet another case of how fast mana is bad for the format. And we saw that with Treasure Cruise, and we saw that through Dig Through Time, and now we're seeing that with the Eldrazi Temple Eye of Ugin thing. And then that led people to going, okay, while we're at it, if we're going to get rid of the Eye, if we're going to get rid of the Temple, we might as well get rid of Simian Spirit Guide, Mox Opal, and things like that. And BBD actually, after the bannings were announced, I was like, whew, thank God I still have a deck. And BBD was like, they still need to go. And I'm like, what? So well, it's still on the radar.
Mox Opal and Simian Spirit Guide are definitely the only, I think they're the only 2 holdovers left. Chrome Mox has been banned since the beginning of the format. And as you mentioned, you know, things like Green Sun Zenith to be able to run 1 million copies of Llanowar Elves in the form of Dryad Arbor, in some sense was a fast mana card also.
Well, every format that has ever been, almost every format that's ever been broken, every format that's ever been bad, is almost always traced back to the mana was too good. You got too much mana too fast. Something was making too much. Like, this is the resource system of the entire structure of our game and our formats. And when you screw that up, everything just falls apart.
Yeah, I think that
Seething Song too.
I think, yes. Well, Seething Song, at least you have to have 3 mana, right? And they want to wait until turn 4 to kill people, so I think Seething Song is safe.
Well, I mean, you know, like, fast mana is fast mana. So, like, you know, it's dangerous more or less any way you slice it. And that's why Simian Spirit Guide all of a sudden blew up. Because why? Because you needed just that 1 more mana. As Wizards, as we slowly, ever so slowly throughout the years, kind of push those mana costs down. Why? Because it's the most exciting when we push those mana costs down. Like, when Wizards starts doing that, then you're able to say, like, oh, okay, well, if I just get this 1 more mana, then I'm able to play this 4/4 for 4 mana that Vendilion clicks my opponent. Like, of course. And as those things continue to happen, things continue to break.
Yeah, it's I mean, it's an ever evolving format. I mean, it's being a eternal format that doesn't rotate lends itself to being broken. And so every time new cards come out, new interactions are going to happen with old cards. And I wouldn't be too surprised if eventually Mox Opal got sat on the bench, Simian Spirit Guide as well.
I agree.
Yeah,
So
sorry.
it's all right. So we're going to keep going here, even though I don't have a transitionary slide. That's a thing. We're going to keep going. There was a article that was written by Christine Sprankle, who is probably the most famous Magic cosplayer that there is. And she wrote an article called "Why I Cosplay for Magic the Gathering." And Aaron, can you tell us a little bit about kind of why this article is special?
Yeah. So Christine is a goddess. If you don't know who she is, I don't know how. But she's most famous for playing characters like Elsbeth and Liliana and Avacyn. Her Avacyn at GP Detroit slayed, pun intended. And she's great. And she always tries to. We don't know very much about Christine as a person. You know, we know about her in terms of cosplay, but we don't know much about her and what kind of goes on in her mind. And, you know, I think that she had seen just some articles going around about, you know, women in gaming and women in magic, and she decided to chime in a little bit. And it's also approaching the 5th anniversary of her first cosplay as Elsbeth. And so she was kind of reflecting on her first cosplay, it literally falling apart on her, but her powering through and showing up at Worlds, World Championship, and sort of her journey to now where she's sort of this force and she's been able to travel the world, and she has little girls who idolize her and who have gotten into cosplay because of her, and her just kind of saying, you know, I'm still here, I still do what I love to do, and just kind of writing a love letter to the game. And I thought it was really sweet.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like, I got to meet Christine at that tournament. It was in San Francisco. It was at Worlds, and it was super sweet. And, you know, she was basically the first person who kind of ever really did that in that way, in terms of, like, I'm here as a attraction. I wouldn't say a spectacle, because I think that comes off wrong. But, you know, as something that is cool and unique about this event, you know, look at all the time and trouble that I went into. And, you know, it was really great. And, you know, those photos kind of, you know, take me back to where I was like, oh, yeah, I remember seeing Christine just kind of walking around, you know, the hall. And it was really cool. And to see where she was and where she started to, like, you know, being a part of the complete, like, unveiling of Shadows over Innistrad, like, is huge. And I'm, you know, if anything, I feel, you know, I'm very proud. I'm like, way to go, Christine, you did a great job, you know, and just keep at it, because obviously you're doing something right.
Right. The other cool thing about Christine that I really like, were the first, and Christine was the first and only Magic cosplayer for a good long time. You know, when you first came on the scene, Evan, you were the only guy with the camera doing things like that.
It's true.
When Nate Holt and Sean Kornhauser came up with Walking the Plains, they were the only guys who were doing that style of documentary filmmaking. And so they were unique. And all three of those projects have paid off in spades. And so as a content creator and someone who considers himself a little bit creative, I'm always in awe when I see things like that, where somebody just completely went outside of everything that's been done before for the past 20 years of Magic and just figure it out, just break the format in one way or another, and are able to just figure it out and carve out their niche. And not only that, but Magic seems to really appreciate the first people to do things, and so they typically keep them around. Sometimes being the first doesn't mean being the best, right? But in Magic, oftentimes, hey, look, man, I'm not saying.
No, it's cool. And the funny thing, I actually
met, cool and all, but the Newsening is the best. No, I'm just kidding.
I met Nate Holt and Mr. Kornhauser. What was his name again?
Yeah, Kornhauser.
Sean. Thank you, Sean Kornhauser. I met both of those guys at San Francisco the same time I met Christine. You know, and those guys were just like, Wizards is thinking about having us do a thing, and I'm like, dude, that's awesome, high five. And I tried to give them as many sort of tips as I could to help them along, because those guys were great. You can tell when people are earnest, you know, about like what it is they're trying to do. You know, there were no ulterior motives. It's like, we like to make stuff and we hope that, you know, that it works, just like I did, and just like I always do. You know, I think as content creators, period, like, you want to make something that people respond to, that people see and can kind of get, you know what I mean? Like, not everyone gets you. Not everyone understands, like, your viewpoint. And sometimes being a content creator is just about knowing how to present things in a way that you will understand them from my perspective, or the way that I get it, or the way that I try to sort of frame whatever argument or whatever story we're talking about. And, you know, those guys were able to do it in a very unique way, and like their little scripted bits, like, you know, nobody was doing that. Just period. Nobody was doing it. And like, when Marrow is on your team, man, you're in good company.
Yeah, and specifically with Christine, I loved this article. I know that she's not a professional writer, and this is probably her first published piece. But it didn't matter because all of it was from a place of passion, and so it didn't really matter that it wasn't super clean, even though it was quite good. It just mattered that she just wanted to put her thoughts on the page, and I love that was something that we can all see from here going forward.
Absolutely. So
yeah, that's definitely one of Christine's strengths too, is like she's very good at letting people in. Like you see her on Twitter saying like, can someone loan me $5 to finish this wig? She's not somebody that has this huge budget at her disposal. She works really, really hard, and you see the sweat, you see everything that goes into it. You see her dealing with criticism, because she does get a lot of criticism, unfortunately, and she powers through all of that. And I really admire people who just aren't afraid to sort of let it all hang out and let you in. And I think it'd be very easy for somebody at her level to, especially if you're in the business of like illusion, it's almost like drag to a certain extent. And like, she's not afraid to show you, she's not afraid to, you'll see her at an event, she's like, God, my feet are killing me, or God, this is going on. And, she sort of knows when to let it down and let you see Christine. And I'd like to see more of Christine. I think she's wonderful.
There you go. So we're going to keep on moving to what we would describe as, we're actually still gathering the townsfolk, as it were, because the league updates to Magic Online. And look, I'm going to give it up to Lee Sharp and crew and Worth. They've been doing a pretty awesome job with Magic Online recently. Like, seriously, you guys have done a terrific job. I've been really impressed. I'm back to Magic Online. I'm back to spending way too much money on Magic Online like I was years ago. I'm back. I'm there. Part of your salary. I'm helping you out. That's what I do here. But regardless, as a result, they've made some really, really great upgrades, and those sort of include a lot of the league stuff. So now there's a sealed multi-stage league, and so leagues happen. Leagues exploded. The sealed league came back and had like almost 6,000 people at one point, like just right under the 6K mark. I think it was the 6K mark. Regardless, infinite people, more than a Grand Prix, was hanging out playing sealed on Magic Online at the same time. I think that's amazing. So there is the multiple stage of the league, and it's a higher payout, but it's more sort of oriented towards the spikes of the world, and that just kind of that allows you to have that separation of, well, I'm playing for fun, or I'm here to win packs or win prizes or win play points or whatever, so I can play in as much as I can because I'm better than everyone else. If you want to be competitive, you can be competitive, and so between that. I think they did a great job. There's now a pre-release league, which I think will be ridiculous. Like, I think if you thought the sealed league was good now, wait till you see the pre-release league. I literally think they're going to hit 10,000 people on that thing. It's going to be massive. It's going to be like, it was one thing when they opened sealed leagues to, when they opened sealed leagues for Battle for Zendikar and Oath of the Gatewatch, and that was great. Like, obviously, it was a fun format. It was a cool format. It wasn't a great format. Like, Innistrad is absolutely looking and feeling, having gone to the pre-release, it's a great format so far. I've been really impressed. I've really enjoyed it. All the interactions are really cool. Nothing is like absolutely dominated in any sort of way. Startled Awake is a thing, but it's mythic. Like you can have some sweet sealed pools. You can have some sweet stuff. The mana fixing is a little rough, but it's supposed to be. It's not. Right. We're not supposed to be like spoiled with mana fixing like we have been. Instead, you're like, okay, I'm green and black, or I'm black and red, or whatever my combination is, and they have payoff cards in every single one of those combinations, and that allows you to build around the sweet uncommons. You can play the mill deck. You can play like sort of the flashbackian S-type thing. There's the spirit deck. There's the red-white aggro deck. All these really cool archetypes. I think Wizards busted their butt on Shadows over Innistrad, not only in the marketing that we've been enjoying so much, but also in the development of the set. And now what I saw and what I reviewed with Brad that I was really happy about, like, actually comes straight through in the cards, and it is a terrific, terrific format. I think it's going to blow up on Magic Online.
Yeah. And the fact that they're able to deliver it to the masses in a reasonable fashion on Magic Online is a thing that is newsworthy and worth pointing out, because it's, first of all, unfortunately, it hasn't been the case for a lot of Magic Online's history. Sure. But because it is the case now, it is worth lauding and saying, well done. All of these changes that they've made recently, not just adding the leagues and updating how the pre-releases work, but they answered a lot of the questions, or not answered, they addressed a lot of the questions having to do with players not really liking the cube that was available. They immediately tried to solve that problem. Now, that didn't go off without a hitch, of course, but they're much more attentive to the audience of Magic the Gathering Online, as opposed to sort of just going, yeah, this will always be our paycheck. This paycheck will always be here. We don't really need to put in a 10 out of 10 effort. I really think that, I completely agree. I think that they've been putting in a 10 out of 10 effort on Magic Online, for the last couple months, and it's refreshing and awesome.
Aaron?
I'm not much of a sealed player, so I will take your word for that.
Well, I mean, there's also constructed leagues and things,
I was getting there, yeah. So they are in they're getting around to making competitive leagues for constructed as well, which I think is going to be really interesting. It sounds like a good idea. It was interesting though. I saw some discussion on Twitter from people who were, I don't want to say concerned necessarily, but they thought it was very interesting that they're calling them friendly versus competitive. And some people were going, well, isn't competition supposed to be friendly? Like, does that mean that like your competition is not friendly? And some people were just kind of expounding on that idea. And I thought that was really interesting. And Lee was entertaining the idea. He's like, well, what else would we call friendly? Because casual is a very hot button word where some people don't like that word and they feel it implies something. And so it'll be interesting to see.
I would much rather they use friendly. That might be
friendly.
That might be the soccer fan in me, in which there are international friendlies as opposed to tournaments. And casual, like you mentioned, does have a much more negative connotation in gaming. And so I like using friendly as the opposite of competitive. It doesn't mean it's not competitive. It just means that it's friendly.
I just find it interesting because it's. I was going to say it's not that I'm not friendly when I'm competitive, but I'm not friendly when I'm competitive. But I thought that discussion was particularly interesting because when I'm competitive, I'll admit that's when I'm least social. Like I'm not as chatty with somebody if I'm at a GP and we're in day 2. It's like I'm here to game, and it's not that I don't care, but if I'm at F&M or if I'm at a pre-release, I'm more likely to be friendlier towards you. And so I thought the whole conversation was really cool.
I agree with that as well. And I've played against Evan a couple times. He knows that I do. All my friends know that on my life pad, when I'm writing in a tournament, it says hero and villain.
It really does.
Villain? Villain? That's aggressive. Why would you call me a villain? And I said, look, I think villain gives you enough respect. We can be friends after the match, but right now you're the villain. Right?
Oh, man.
I think that's a reasonable amount of respect to send across the table. And then after the match, we can go get a snack.
Well, nice. And we get snacks. Look, I mean, and all right, so as much as I'm like to laud Magic Online, I like to say that I'm tough but fair, okay? And if I'm being fair and tough, Wizards released a legendary cube with no legendary packs, which was the whole reason, which was like part of it is like, I want to play a big dirtly cube, and Lord God, you want to dirtle your face off. That legendary cube, particularly the first go around, was as dirtily as I've ever seen one in my entire life. Mm-hmm. But they took away the legendary packs, and legendary packs that like I was like, I'm like, I don't know, maybe I could sell these for whatever. I was on stream and I cracked them and I sold all that stuff for like 15 or 20 tickets or whatever. It was great, and there were a bunch of stuff that was really cool for Commander players, and they just decided like, right, we're okay. We don't really give you like real prizes. We have to give you the play point stuff. Well, a cube is too dirtily. It's not worth really playing. No one was really excited about it, and I do appreciate that they changed the stream. Like they changed midstream to something else that people like and people knows work. And then they had to replace 5 cards awkwardly because they were bugged. And that's a weird thing. And there's stuff that, I know Jeff Hoagland loves to just smack the Magic Online people upside the head every chance. But at the same time, he's not necessarily wrong that a card like Wall of Roots can see play in multiple archetypes, and at least the main archetype that it wants to be in, which is obviously his Court of Calling deck. When that thing is bugged, that's a problem. And it would be nice if Wizards would take, a little something that has been around for a long time, maybe making a specific effort to say, hey, we know that this is very important in this archetype. Modern's a thing. There's constructed leagues, and we'll fix that stuff. So it's a little bit frustrating, but I don't really hold it against him in many ways when it comes to that type of stuff. When he's like, all right, this is great, but what's up with all this buggy stuff? I just don't get it.
Well, to be fair though, I mean, And that's just kind of how business works. It's like, so I had to renew my cell phone contract back in November, and I'd been with my cell phone company since I was 18, and I'm 32 now. So I've been with them 14 years. And I remember when I went to renew the contract, I was like, do you have anything for me? Because I've been with you guys for so long. And they were like, well, no, but we have, and meanwhile, I see this sign for new customers. It's like this amazing plan with like, all this data and all these gigs. And you see that with a lot of businesses where they will go out of their way for a newer customer in a way that they won't for a long time customer. And I'm not saying that makes it right, but that does seem to be an acceptable business model, is that we have you, we know you're really not going anywhere, but we really want to get these people who we haven't been able to interest before. And so I'm not surprised that happened at all.
Sure. So I mean, and I appreciate the fact that we've had a lot of strides forward, but it's been a thing. All right, so let's get into a different topic altogether. I'm gonna pull up the page here. So there's a little service called Puka Trade, and Puka Trade has been by all accounts, a very popular, very successful service where you're able to trade cards that you don't want for cards that you do want. And you're able to do that through fun bucks that they call Puka points, and you trade these things back and forth, and they have value because you essentially say they have value. You believe that these points are worth X, and everyone kind of has this understanding that they are worth X, therefore they have a value that's able to be maintained. However, one of the things that this kind of all began with, it's been a year since Puka Trade raised $60,000 to add new features, and none of them have materialized. So to start there, I would note that I think $60,000, while it sounds like a lot of money, isn't a lot of money in the world of web development. And anybody I think who's in the industry, anybody who has experience in that, anybody who's really a programmer can tell you, like, you're going to spend a lot more than $60K depending on what site you're working on, which affects a certain number of users and impacts a lot of people. And so they were unable to make those things happen. Now, another kind of aspect that happened here in the page itself was they kind of started remarking, like, well, you realize that Puka Trade has engaged in a lot of activities that have devalued their own currency, where you have them doing things like giving away points for signing up for their monthly subscription and their yearly subscription and so on and so forth. And even doing things like giving people points just for being interviewed by the dev team or by the creators of Puka Trade. Like, hey, here, have some points. So you like some points? There's some points. And if anyone knows anything about the problem with Zimbabwe and what happened with their banking system, what happened with their currency system, why there is literally $1 billion bill in Zimbabwe, because they kept making up money out of thin air. And the stats that were in the Reddit article, and I haven't vetted this stuff, so feel free to go and find it and Ruben will post a link in the chat and stuff. But regardless, if you go and look at it, they estimated that Puka points used to be worth, a penny. So 100 Puka points was $1. And now they say it's worth about 60 cents to the dollar, 60 cents to the 100 Puka points. And as you begin this slow climb downward, you're going to find at some point that now people kind of have to be bribed. You have to sort of give extra points in order to get things, and things aren't being traded sort of at the same values that they used to be. And as they kind of flood the market with points that have nothing behind them except dollars, in which they decided to make up, or those Puka points they decided to make up out of thin air, then things are going to start to get worse before they get better.
Yeah. This is an unfortunate situation just all around. I'm not a huge, I don't participate in Puka Trade, but I do see that it has had a positive impact on the Magic community, particularly the ease of trading. As we have moved forward in technology, and the most popular cab company in the world is Uber, right? It doesn't own any vehicles. The most popular hotel company in the world is Airbnb. They don't own any hotel rooms. Right. One of the most popular trading and card dealers in the world doesn't actually own any cards, and that's Puka Trade. And so it's been a really good force for good within the Magic community. But by the same token, this is kind of awful, right? Like, you look at the facts, and it's like, first of all, Puka Trade's a for-profit company that did launch a Kickstarter that took money that they said they were going to do one thing with, and now they're doing something else with. Which looks really bad. At best they just bit off more than they could chew, which doesn't put a lot. So let's hope for the best and say that they simply bit off more than they could chew and promised the world when they could only deliver a portion of that. It's sad, but you know what? Here we are. It's just frustrating, and that Puka Trade thought that they could do all this stuff. But certainly a year down the line, you expect to get something, and it doesn't seem like they've delivered almost anything on the original Kickstarter that they were trying to get accomplished. Aaron, do you use Puka Trade, right?
So
the three of us, you actually use it.
Yeah, I have about a dozen cards on their way to me right now, actually. Full disclosure, I myself have received Puka points, not because they've always been given to me after the fact. So when I was doing the deck tease, I had the founder, Eric Freitag, on my show. After he appeared on the show, he said he had a lot of fun and he gave me some points. So full disclosure, I've been given Puka points. I do use the service. I've gone to both of their parties at GP Vegas and GP Oakland. Nice guys. I do use the service. I'm not economy girl, so I don't get into MTG finance. I know nothing about what points and dollars and all that stuff are worth. I'm also not tech girl. I don't know what $60,000 gets you. I don't know anything about that, so I can't really comment on that. But I can say just from a public standpoint, from an image standpoint, even if I'm kind of like you, Ruben. I don't think they're con men. I don't think that we've been scammed or anything like that. I do think it was some guys that had a vision and got a little ahead of themselves. I'm not saying that makes it right, but the part that I'm a little concerned about is how they're choosing to respond to these allegations. You're seeing people question them, and they're not commenting on their Reddit posts. They're pointing people to a podcast and basically just using this as an opportunity to plug their own stuff. Like, that's a really good question. Go listen to our podcast. And it's like, so why do we got to listen to your show and give you a download, give you a click to get an answer from you? Like, I'm not sure that that's the best PR response is to, and I've heard that people who've even listened to the podcast have not gotten an answer. So you've used this as a plug for your product that didn't even give people what they were looking for. So you're making people even more mad. And so just the PR response, I think, is really lacking here. The transparency is really not here. I think that people would be understanding if they just knew what was going on. Like, if you were just like, hey, we did spend the money, this guy didn't work out or whatever, I think people would be more inclined to give you the benefit of the doubt. But it's the fact that a year has gone by, we haven't seen anything, not a one, and your response is crap. It's like, okay, that's 2 strikes. And it's like, I think that and I think the economy is the 3rd strike, actually, that people are just sort of like, okay, we're really just not a fan right now. And that's unfortunate, because I think it is a great site, and it's a resource that I do recommend to people. And for the way that I play, it's good for me. And it makes me sad when I see a great thing kind of bogged down by this, because they're not wrong, but it's just, I hate that this is what we're talking about instead of how great it is.
Sure. I mean, and I will obviously want it to be great as well. But, when you find that they're doing things that are devaluing their own sort of product, I mean, as it were, and you can see that if the original value was X and now it's Y, we don't have to be too much into the economics to know that the product's getting less valuable than it used to be. Ultimately, all right, so if I were to able to offer, if there is someone from Puka Trade, if there is someone who knows someone from Puka Trade that may or may not be listening to this, my advice to them is that too much time has passed to respond to the thread proper, okay? So now that means you got some time. So take a day or two and write yourself a nice big text, post on Reddit. Get transparent. None of this crap where you're pointing people to the podcast and trying to make people read through the lines. Just tell them for real. Just tell them seriously what's going on. If the 60K is gone and the new features ain't done, say that. If the new features are going to take a long time, if the new features need to be figured out in terms of which one is the most important for your users, talk to all of your Indiegogo people who sponsored you and say, hey, here's what we can do. Out of the 7 things we promised, we can do 1 of them. What do you really want? And at the end, you're probably just going to eat some crow, apologize, tell them you wish things had gone differently, no, you didn't use it all on margaritas, but at the end of the day, you just ran out of cash for what you was trying to do. Obviously, that appears to be the case, but the more that you can come clean here, the better it looks for your service. So that would be what I would tell them.
Good advice.
It's funny that you mentioned their community manager, because he plays at my local game store. Like, he's from Milwaukee. Hi, Vinny.
Hi,
so
Vinny.
I can probably pass that on to him.
I'm just trying to help people out. That's all I'm trying to do.
Sure.
All right, so Next up here, we have a theory. And this would be on Desperate Ravings, as it were. But there's a theory. So there were a few test prints that got out. On the backs of Smoldering Marsh and Ob Nixilis was an Endbringer that was put together like so. So if you had the Puka, so you would have the cards, they would be like this. Or whatever, like that. Wait a minute, like this, so I can do the thing. So and then you'd flip them back, and then there would be cards like this, and this would be the card. This, ladies and gentlemen, is Emrakul, the Aeon's Eldritch Moon, or whatever thing that they're going to do. At least that's the theory. Because why? In the test print that was leaked online, the back of it had an Endbringer, but it also had a spot in the top left where the sun and the moon go on Innistrad cards. And again, why of all the things would a big Magic card be printed over 2 cards? How in the world did this ever get out in the first place? It was immediately snapped up on eBay. No one ever saw hide or hair of it again. But I can already hear Mark Rosewater like just leaping for joy that he found a way to bring Big Furry Monster to Magic. Big Furry Monster, if you're unaware, is from an unset that you needed both halves of the card for it to be like an actual creature, and it was like a 99.99 and had all these really silly abilities. But if you were able to get it out, well, then you had the full thing. Well, here we have this incredible story moment where Emrakul is somewhere on Innistrad, probably in the moon, and if you have like an artifact that's the moon or a land that's the moon, and you have Nahiri's like hit Sorin in the face stick or whatever, and then they flip over into the ultimate creature of all time, they can make that creature do literally anything. It does not matter how good that Emrakul is, because it can't be abused in older formats. You can't show and tell it, you can't through the breach it, you can't do any of that stuff. So however awesome they want to make that card be, they can make that card be. It can be 100/100 with 100 abilities and nobody cares. So to me, that is incredibly exciting and interesting, and you know, it's just one of those things that I appreciate Mr. Emerson Esquire on Reddit for kind of going out there and be like, yo, this kind of looks like what they're doing in Eldritch Moon, and we just didn't catch it at the time. Anybody?
Aaron just has this look on her face, like she's just like, you guys and your goddamn conspiracies again. Look, I got my tinfoil hat ready to put it right back on, but I was waiting for Aaron to sort of calm everybody down.
Aaron, now you can tell me I'm cray-cray, and none of what I said made any sense.
I think the only thing I have to say to all of that is that's adorable.
Wow. Okay, so I got like the alternative of bless your heart. Thank you very much. Well, Aaron, just bless honestly, your heart.
How many context clues do you need before you think that a two-sided or largely over is a part of the story of the set that's already called Eldritch Moon? What more can I show you? How much more proof can I give you? Eldrazi can't melt steel beams, Aaron.
They can't. They really can't. It's just a thing. You can't see the stars when you're on the Eldritch Moon. I don't know if you knew that, but
right.
Can't see them.
This is look, man. I'm buying into this conspiracy.
Okay, so if we're doing tinfoil hat theories, I think I've told you who I think the big bad of Eldritch Moon is.
Who?
Okay.
I think it's actually the, if you remember, McDonald's back in the day had Mac, the moon guy.
Oh my God.
In the suit. I think it's him.
Now we're just being trolled. Nice
Eldritch Moon. It's a moon. He can be Eldritch. You're going to feel really bad when he flies down with that piano and kills everybody. Just saying.
Oh my God.
Aaron.
An army of fry guys are just going to be on the plane.
Aaron,
See?
just come. You can come. I'll show you my. Look, I have a shed full of Polaroids to show you. All of the threads. I had to buy a lot of yarn at Michael's Craft Supply
and push
to
pins.
Connect all of the and push pins and light bulbs that hang directly from the ceiling with no shade on them, even though you have shade.
I have more shade than a cloudy day.
Wow.
That's right. I'm telling you, all the pieces are coming together, Aaron. This is the end of Act 1. This is the end of Act 1 of the monster movie, where you see the dead body and you see that it's been killed by something that you don't really recognize, right? And then in Act 2, you get a small little glimpse of its foot going through the door or whatever, and that'll come in previews later. And then you'll just be, you'll just be the president that refused to shoot down whatever the danger was in Act 3, and I'll be the scientist that tried to warn you all along.
Wow.
Because I've always wanted to be Jeff Goldblum.
All right. So let me put it this way. Aaron, let's imagine that what I had explained earlier actually happens. There's card A, there's card B. They flip into a single monster creature. How do you feel about that?
Sure.
Let's just imagine that's the thing.
So if I'm understanding it correctly, it couldn't actually see any play? Like, is it just...
Why not?
It would be tough to... it's a Mondo combo. It's a card that can only combo with itself.
Right.
Theoretically, the halves are okay cards, but then obviously when they come together... peanut butter and jelly come together to make something that's greater than the sum of its parts. And so
I don't like jelly,
that's
well, you do sound
fine.
jelly,
Well,
so
peanut butter. That's great.
That was good. That was
Whatever
good.
you want. Chocolate and peanut butter. You get your peanut butter and the chocolate.
Get your
chocolate
bacon.
and peanut butter, and you put it on your cheeseburger.
On the cheeseburger.
You're damn right you do.
Then I'm
Much better.
interested. Then I'm interested. I mean,
So let's say you have a card that's the pale bacon,
Here we
and then
go.
you've got cheeseburger, the Eon's Torn, right? And you need both in play. And then when you put them together, you get bacon on your cheeseburger, the Eon's Torn Emrakul.
sure.
It's a monster of pain,
They
and
changed
yes,
the rules. Here's the other thing: is that they changed the rules slightly for Magic every time a new set comes out, so that the cards that are in the set function. The new
Right.
Avacyn, for example, had to have a new passage in the rules written so that it didn't flip endlessly every time another creature died, so that you could deal infinite damage to your opponent by having a sacrifice outlet.
right.
The rules can change, and so I'm sure there will be a rule in the text that says when two card halves become stapled together, it only counts as one card. So I think that it's not unreasonable to think that this could be a thing.
I think
Sure.
this to me sounds like classic Rosewater. This is
Yes.
literally, look at this amazing
Or
thing
classic
I did.
Reddit.
Well, no, I mean, just hold on. The thing about, he did this thing in the unset, and no one could believe it could ever happen. It's never going to happen in real Magic. He found a way to make it happen in real Magic. That's just going to be...
Right.
That is just a 100% classic Rosewater story. He loves to do those stories.
And every time he does it, he writes an article about, like, guys, I figured out how to make rocket-powered Turbo Slug, a card.
He did.
Happens every time something in Unglued and Unhinged becomes a thing. And the flagship card from Unglued was BFM.
It's
And
true.
he's finally figured out a way to do it. I think that that's the biggest context clue for me, is that Mark Rosewater is Mark Rosewater, and that it makes just too much sense for him to try to have been doing this whole time. And the opportunity finally presented itself, and they finally figured out the rules to be able to make it work. And now we get this cool payoff.
There you go. So we'll see if that actually comes to light. So we're gonna keep moving here. Twitter announced that they won the bid to live stream NFL games. That would be our splash damage for this week had we had the nice overlay. But splash damage means it's kind of tangentially related to Magic, but it's not really related. It's not really Magic per se. And obviously this isn't. This is about the National Football League being on Twitter as a service. It's it feels like it's going to blow the mind of many, even obviously myself over here, going like, I'm going to open Twitter and watch the NFL game. What? It's not YouTube, it's not Twitch, it's not any other, even sort of like a delivery service like, CBS has a service, or Fox, or even CNN, or Fox News, or anybody, the people who kind of run out a lot of live video. It's none of those services, it's Twitter. What? So it just kind of demonstrates that we're starting to live in a world where the delivery of content happens almost anywhere. It doesn't really matter. I mean, we could talk like, you could be watching the Pro Tour in Snapchat for all we know. Wizards have been doing a lot of streaming on Facebook. So if Facebook came to Wizards of the Coast and said, well, hell, they would go to Hasbro corporate. They would say, hey, Hasbro, how you doing? Would you like to broadcast all of your cool online content to millions and millions a billion people who are liking, there's millions of people who like the Magic page. Don't you want to tell those people, isn't that a lot more of the likes that you have rather than on Twitch or even on YouTube that you're streaming on right now? Like, you should stream on us, the social media website. And if that happens, that's not necessarily a bad thing. You could start seeing like actual ratings of hundreds of thousands of people watching Magic if you're able to reach an audience that's on Facebook. So yeah. I can certainly see these types of very corporate, very high level meetings where they're like, you're able to hit the demographics and you're able to hit this span of people and look at all these people who like it and take a look at all these charts and graphs of how many people are watching videos on Facebook. And this is a way better choice for the company rather than just streaming on Twitch, who is about like, one dude who's streaming out of his bedroom. No, you're you're Hasbro, you are Wizards of the Coast. You are bringing one of the most powerful IPs that exist in modern gaming. Take it to a platform that could really showcase it. So these little dips of the toe in Facebook, I absolutely see as being sort of like the rumbling of the tracks before something changes in the way that we watch Wizards official coverage in some way.
Yeah. I think that the big thing as it pertains to Magic is that Magic has, ever since the beginning, in terms of streaming, has always been a Twitch thing. There aren't, when YouTube came out with their live streaming service, nobody really did it on YouTube's service. They still made YouTube videos, but I think they all kept staying on Twitch. That's right. Where live streaming for Magic has lived. And this sort of could signal in the future a changing of the guard in some way, shape, or form. If other games start moving away, other games that are more similar, things like Hearthstone or poker, or if they move over, particularly other games like Hex, which is probably going to have some streaming in the near future because they have 3 large events in the next calendar year, I think.
And everybody's talking about it.
Yeah, I mean, you started to see some of the bigger names in Magic start to practice Hex and tweet about Hex. And we haven't heard anything about how those will be broadcast. And so if people start migrating away from Twitch, which is a large service, I mean, it was purchased by Amazon for $900 million.
Right.
But it's not Facebook big. It's not Google big, right? So if Hasbro, which is a company that's on the scale of Amazon, and it's not quite that big, but it's on that scale, it's not unreasonable to expect that perhaps that sort of ball that has been pretty solid staying together on Twitch could see little strands of it start to get picked apart and head to different IPs.
Aaron?
I think this is just good branding. I think you see this on social media. It's like, if you're a content creator, you better have a Twitter and a Facebook and an Instagram and possibly a Snapchat. Like, to do anything in this day and age and just rely on one form of social media really just doesn't cut it. And I think that, for a while it's, and I think you're right, for Twitch was like just kind of on Twitch. And so while the rest of us are getting our names out there any way that we can and trying to, certain people follow you on one, format, but they don't follow you in another. And like, there are people who, you assume, well, everybody knows what Twitch is. Not everybody does know what Twitch is. And so if you can appeal to people who would never set foot on a Twitch stream, maybe because of the chat, just saying, but you could be taking your business to Twitter, you'd be taking your business to Facebook and just sort of diversifying your portfolio, so to speak. And I think it's just good branding. I think it's something a lot of us have already clued into, and I think it's something that streaming can certainly do as well. You see people trying to stream through YouTube and things like that, and I think this is perfectly normal, and I think it's smart, and so I'm really excited to see what people do with it.
Sure, and I mean, I think and to me, it's really about sort of the delivery mechanism. It's not so much that they want to touch different places, because obviously Magic's already in those different places. It's really like, if you were to take your core broadcast, if Wizards said, we are broadcasting only to Facebook. Why? Because Facebook gave us money to only broadcast through Facebook. I would not be surprised by that. they would not say that they got paid for it, but whatever. But, when you see that type of thing happen, you can probably imagine something's on the back end. Either way, being able to say that should actually grow the Magic audience, and that's the type of thing when they come to these really high-level meetings and they say, look, you're getting 40K, sometimes almost 50K viewers. Like, don't you want 100,000 viewers? Don't you want 250,000 viewers? You have all these millions of people who are devouring content every second of every day, millions of them like your page. Here's your opportunity. That's the way I can kind of see it going down. Regardless, we're going to move on here to our final bit, as we do each and every week, to the finisher. And the finisher this week, well, we are back to our regularly scheduled Magic Mics after last week's break for my full set review with myself and Brad Nelson. But for the next one, and for the next time one of us needs to take a break, what's another excuse we could use to take a week off? Ruben?
Well, guys, I'm really sorry, but I can't make it into the show this week because I've got a pretty high fever. And the only cure is more awful clue puns. Those need investigation.
They're so bad.
They need investigating, you guys.
Wake up, sheeple. Wake up.
I write them all. I write all about them in Tamio's journal.
Yeah, you do. Aaron?
Well, fellas, I'm really sorry, but I can't make it into the show this week because Shadows over Innistrad just came out, and I have to catch up on my personal banned and restricted list.
Yeah,
everybody.
Bob Ross is on there, by the way.
I'm surprised that update hasn't come out yet, actually.
It's a thing. I'm ready to see, Bob Ross was unbanned. Everyone's like, what? And everybody freaks out. And they write articles about it. It's unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. All right, so Aaron, Ruben, look, I'm sorry, but I got to cancel this week. I have more research on armpits to take care of. I got pictures to look through. I got status updates. I got tweets. Yeah, you say one thing, ladies and gentlemen. You say one thing. All right. Regardless, that ends another episode of Magic Mics. We want to thank you guys very much for joining us here, as you do each and every week at 11 o'clock Eastern on Wednesdays. I want to thank my co-host very much, Ruben Bressler.
Oh, well, thank you.
Aaron, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So this is the part where I forgot to load the outro slide, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. In the meantime, I want to thank you guys very, very much for joining us, as you do here. All right, we're going to move on. There we go. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, thank you guys for watching and joining us here. We hope you support us at patreon.com/magicmics. Visit our website at magicmicspodcast.com that exists thanks to our Patreon subscribers, or follow, like, tweet, favorite, share, and do everything social that tells me we exist while they laugh at me. Catch us online at twitch.tv/magicmics, on Twitter at magicmicscast, on Reddit at reddit.com/r/magicmics, and on Facebook at facebook.com/magicmics. Talk to us privately at magicmicspodcast@gmail.com. Follow the audio-only podcast at magicmicspodcast.libsyn.com, or find us on iTunes, or join us here next week, same time, same place, for another episode of Magic Mics. Good night, everybody.